Has it been another month already? Crazy. Fantasy Author's Handbook, Phil. We're here talking about February of 2024. Doing these monthly wrap-up videos. Yeah, last month, the January wrap-up video, which was my first, was like an hour and 20 minutes long. This one will be shorter. I'm doing it a little bit, maybe even a lot more kind of seat in my pants. So let's just get right into it. What has been up with Fantasy Author's Handbook, with Phil, with etc. in the month of February, the year of our Lord, or somebody's Lord, 2024. Let's find out. Let's start actually with, like we did, and we'll do the same order as last time. Because are we not all creatures of habit in some degree or another? Let's start with books purchased. So, I buy books, and in January we talked about how I bought really, really lots of books in 2023 and have calmed down. We're calming down for 2024, but we continue. We continue to buy books. Also, last month you saw that I had purchased the second of the 3 books by Edward P. Bradbury, who is actually Michael Moorcock. These are they're not literally set in the same world as Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars. Not exactly the same Mars, not Barsoom, but Moorcock's version of the classic Sword and Planet tale. I got the first one in one of those big eBay lots from last year, and then I'm not going to buy the other 2? So I did. I ordered and received the second one last month, and then this month, toward the beginning of February, received this really nice copy. Very, spine is in great shape. The purple sprayed edges are weirdly only faded on the bottom. I don't know if somebody just had this upside down or sitting on a windowsill like this. I don't know. Really, really terrific shape. Barbarians of Mars by Edward P. Bradbury, a.k.a. science fiction and fantasy mega legend Michael Moorcock. Excited to actually read this trilogy. We're going to put that over there. Speaking of authors I should have been reading, I've read a ton of Michael Moorcock. I have not read any Christopher Priest, and I feel like a bad boy about that. And so I started buying some, because you got to buy the book before you read it, unless you go to the library or do like Kindle Unlimited or Audible. You know what I mean. I buy books, therefore I am. This is The Adjacent by Christopher Priest. I basically know nothing about it, which is the way I prefer to go into a book. This is one of those UK Golance addictions. Freudian flip there. Christopher Priest, one of the sort of, central authors of that sort of British New Wave science fiction period. Excited. I have a couple other of his books. I think I'm going to read Inverted World first. But I will soon enough, I don't know how long it'll take me, eventually I will read The Adjacent by Christopher Priest. Happy to have it in my life. This one will hardly read on camera at all, because I got a great deal on it from Amazon used. It's in fantastic shape, but it does not have a dust jacket. The dust jacket that came with this, though, was one of those really super, pardon me, with all love, unbelievably boring and pointless UK just color block author name title covers. So I'm not really missing much by not having it. This is Ritual in the Dark, and it was Outlaw Bookseller, right? Who mentioned this, by Colin Wilson. There you can at least see who it's by and what it's called and whatnot. 1960. I think he said this is one of his favorite, or his favorite novel of all time, favorite book of all time. That's enough of a recommendation from basically anybody who I haven't identified as a crazy person. And even then, maybe crazy people have great... Nobody's crazy. We don't use the C word. Whatever. Ritual in the Dark by Colin Wilson. I literally know nothing about it, just like The Adjacent by Christopher Priest. Just somebody who shares some of my, view on books and genre and so on. Said it was really, really good. That's enough for me. Also, inexpensive on the Amazon used marketplace. Good shape, no dust jacket, no big deal. It goes onto the voluminous to be read piles. Speaking, I'm going to be doing a lot of physical stuff here as I put books back and forth and put them on shelves and things like that. Just bear with me. Another book that I've had for a long time, right, and did not have, this is, I believe, the first one of these. Am I looking around to try to find the first one? I'm not going to go find the first one yet. It's Ray Cummings, Tama of the Lake Country. I adore my Ace Devils, and this is the same period, or the same era of these very smaller format, right? This is a kind of standard mass market paperback, and you can see that the Ace edition is shorter and then a little bit wider. I love, love, love this format. This is in spectacular condition, Tama of the Lake Country. This is a 2-book series, right? Not even a series. It's a book and a sequel. Right? How old school beautiful is this? Just gorgeous. Kidnapped by a spaceship. What is not to love about this? Oh my God. Are all the artificial satellites circling the Earth ours? How can we be sure that these little metal globes, these observational devices with their top secret interiors, were all made on Earth? All right, did Sputnik freak people out? When was this? 1965? Outstanding. Tama of the Lake Country. This is goings on on the planet Mercury. Love. 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 I didn't do all the research and stuff that I often do when I'm looking at books. Cover by Podwill. Terrific, though, right? So that's a series, whatever, the book and the sequel now, complete, to be read as soon as humanly possible. Last month you knew that I was reading The Tarring Kring by Alan Dean Foster, which was the first slash second, I think it's the second, I'm reading them in chronological order, of the Pip and Flink series by Alan Dean Foster. I do not have all of those books yet, and I just based on the first two and just my history as a Alan Dean Foster fan for just years and years and years since I was a little kid. I'm going to keep reading the series, so I'm going to buy them as they come, whatever, as they come in front of me. So this one I picked up inexpensively again out there in the used book marketplace. These aren't necessarily like big collector's items or anything. And again, I also am not trying to collect a particular, first editions or only hardcovers. I don't think any of these were hardcovers. Maybe science fiction book club editions, but whatever. So it's whatever edition I can find, as long as it's in readable condition too. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can see the lovely spine fading there, but otherwise it's in pretty good shape. Entirely readable, right? And I was like, oh, groovy. This is actually a short story collection that includes one story in the Pip and Flink's saga, but good enough for me. This goes into the series to be read in series order, but how about this? Oh. If you keep up with my shorts, first of all, that means that you are an amazing, accomplished, fantastically intelligent human being. But it also means that this won't be a big surprise to you, but for the rest of you, a big surprise. Don't you just love when you buy a used book, especially online where you can't see it, you're not in the store and you're not flipping through it, and it doesn't say it was, and they didn't charge you extra for it being signed by the author. Nerd love. Nerd love. Speaking of series, I am closing in on, and I have two more, right? I have one more. Did I just hit the microphone and make an obnoxious noise? I have two more already on the way that have been ordered but haven't gotten to me yet. And then one more to order after that, and then I'm done with the entire 29 book series, the new Tom Swift Jr. Adventures. I will do an entire video on this once I actually get all of the books. This is in the blue edition. We'll talk about the difference between the blue. You can see them all right here behind me. Where's my hand? Oh, there's my hand. I don't know what to do with my hands. Right here behind me, Tom Swift series. Most of them, the ones that I have, are yellow. That was what they looked like during my era, which my era was like the early to mid 1970s. So this is the one of the series that I'm collecting just for the benefit of my inner child. Like, hey, like 7-year-old Phil, I'm going to finally have all of those books for you. And I'm reading them too. Remember last month we talked about I go from series to series to series. And I will eventually get, and it will come cycle back to Tom Swift, and I will read all of these in the reasonable near future. This one is Tom Swift in the Race to the Moon. Art just so imaginative and crazy and colorful. Just beautiful. This cloth overboard or library bound children's book, Rawson and Dunlap, with the same illustration on the end papers throughout the entire series, which is super cool. This was a Christmas present, I think, for Gary, and then Gunter later on had it. Gunter, from Christmas 1963. 60 years ago, some kid got this book for Christmas, and now it's mine. The enemy rocket ship fired a volley of missiles. Of course it did. Why wouldn't it? Kidding me? And so there's illustrations like that throughout. I mean, obviously it's a middle grade book for kids, and, it's definitely a product of its time, which would have been really being published in the mid to late 60s. Mid to late 50s. But just really beautifully done. And definitely back in that rah-rah America, big engineering, sort of old economy thing. But I don't know. This one, you just have to go, well, old men remember weird stuff. It was already pretty old in my childhood. Tom Swift Jr., I Want Them All. Those were all the books that I bought in the month of February of 2024. That's not very many for Phil. I think that might be kind of not really a lot, but normal for most people. I don't know. I am slowing down. That was really one book every Wednesday plus the sort of impulse buy of the Colin Wilson thing. Right? That was his name? I don't even know. We're moving on because we're going to do this in less than an hour. Books read in February of 2024. These would be books, obviously, that I finished reading in February. Not that I started and finished reading, you know what I mean, whatever. Books that I finished reading in February 2024. If you saw last month's video, you'll remember these as, or at least a few of these, as books that I was still reading. And we'll get to those now for February. I don't like to play favorites. This was the favorite of the books that I finished in February for sure. Gentlemen Overboard. Herbert Clyde Lewis. Recovered books that goes back and finds these forgotten texts, books, and brings them back out into the world. Oh my God, this is so good. It was just so good. And there's no spoiler in saying that in chapter 1, a gentleman is on a ship crossing the Pacific Ocean from Honolulu to the Panama Canal and accidentally falls overboard, and that happens. The ship keeps going. Where this goes is both surprising. It doesn't go crazy over the top. That might already be spoilery. I'm not even going to say anything. Just buy this book. You will not be sorry. And in true cult fashion, if you are sorry, then that's your fault and not mine. Gentleman Overboard. Herbert Clyde Lewis recommended full throat recommendations. I have been feeling a little bit under the weather, so this is as full as the throat goes. Let's just say I really, really like that book, and I believe that anyone else will like it too. Remember also last month we talked about how, so that was the, where's my, oh yeah, no, whatever. That I would go through these series of series and they switch off between, literary magazines and an ace double, then whatever. Tom Swift and Perry Rodan back here and everything. So last month I was reading the Paris Review, woefully behind on my Paris reviews. This is spring 2022. Just spectacular. I mean, it was, I don't know. I know they're snobby, they're snooty, they're literati, etc. But, the interview with Jamaica Kincaid, 100% worth the price of admission. It's expensive to subscribe. They might be a little bit hard to kind of go back and find back issues of or whatever. Just buying one, the cover price of this is $20. Remember when magazines used to be like a few bucks? But anyway, library? I don't know. The Paris Review, what can you say? It's just, I think it remains the preeminent American literary magazine. Prove me wrong, and I will subscribe to the one that you're talking about. Also read in February. Finished in February. What We Owe the Future by William McCaskill. All right, so I give every book that I read 5 stars on Goodreads, and I'm going to do a whole video about why I do that. And I didn't dislike this book, okay? It is very interesting. I'm not saying don't buy it. I'm not saying don't read it. I'm still, and I read it cover to cover, I don't know exactly what we owe the future. That kind of seems like a bug, right? Like if your book is literally called What We Owe the Future, we should know at the end of that what we owe the future. Is it really only that we should all be vegans and have lots of kids? I mean, I don't know. You read it and tell me what you think, because we're all free, independent humans who are free to read stuff and make our own decisions about it. What do we owe the future? The jury is still out. I mean, obviously, I think we owe something to the future, right? I'm not like one of these. Forget it. If our grandchildren all suffocate and have no water to drink, too bad for them, right? They're just being lazy, honestly, right? We owe the future something, right? That we should be good stewards of of the earth, of our civilization. While we're here, we should add to things. We should move things forward. We should try to make things better. I didn't actually get that message out of that book. Anyway, the good news is the next nonfiction book that I read and finished, because it's pretty short, really text-wise, but just read it voraciously because it was amazing. Really just, it renewed my faith in nonfiction. I didn't hate that book. Madman's Library, The Madman's Library by Edward Brooke Hitching. So very, very good. This had been out for a while, apparently in the UK, and was picked up here by Chronicle Books, who did a terrific job with everything except the binding. Can you hear this? Of course, it's not doing it as much now. While I was reading it, it's like really crackly spine, but whatever, it's fine. It's holding together in the interior. Can I hold this up in a way that isn't going to be just like, we don't try to look cool on Fantasy Author's Handbook. We are cool. We don't need to look cool. lavishly illustrated, right? And this is a brief history. The text doesn't go into a minute detail on all these things. It's an overview of weird books, strange books through the many, many centuries. And it's got some of the kind of usual suspects. The Voynich manuscript is in here, books bound in human skin that always has to be suffered over. Let's not do that. Let's not make those. I doubt that it's legal to do that, but I'm going to read just quickly the contents page. Books that aren't books. Books made of flesh and blood. Cryptic books, literary hoaxes. Curious collections, works of the supernatural, religious oddities, curiosities of science, books of spectacular size, both really, really small and really, really huge. And then a list of strange titles and a select bibliography and index, all that stuff. The list of strange titles is just a hoot all by itself. And it can be... these could be like story prompts all by themselves, right? Does the Earth rotate? No. It does. You're reading that right. You're reading that right. The Madman's Library, this one just will not disappoint. If you're the slightest bit interested in just like the history of books, if you are a fantasy author, this is just full of imagery and descriptions of weird books that you will mine forever for story ideas. Hey, people running D&D, there are images in here that you can use like crazy. I made a little short, like, why aren't people making a monster manual with images like this? And there are more of these throughout the entire book. Like, what the heck? Absolutely 100%. Definitely recommended. The Madman's Library. Must own, must have, must enjoy book of the month of February. And then I went to my next, we'll call it nonfiction book. I found this and this is what I do, like, and why I have been avoiding going to bookstores. Believe it or not. I mean, that's sad. I don't want to actually say that out loud for the first 2 months of the year because we're just trying to kind of budget correct a little bit. Also, reading hasn't been like super crazy because work this month for sure. Been really super busy, but on a trip to a used bookstore, I ran across this and it just looks so goofy and weird. How could I not buy it, right? I mean, look at this book. And this is with the dust jacket, which hides, again, that cloth overboard printed hardcover, which benefited from the dust jacket being on here the whole time. And the book itself is in terrific shape. This was published in 1959. This is Epigrams on Men, Women, and Love by Balzac, who, of course, had been dead for almost 100 years by the time this was published in 1959. He died in 1850. Almost 100 years, more than 100 years. I mean, what is this? This is a collection of little, epigrams, right? Little funny quotes, little funny sayings, aphorisms, observations, and then sprinkled with these little groovy woodcut kind of illustrations that are just, funny and weird. So the book is 60 pages long, right? Like fully 62 pages, including the front matter. So, and, not densely packed. Not densely packed with text. So this is something that I think really any reader could just sit down and decide, I'm going to read Epigrams on Men, Women, and Love by Balzac right now, from cover to cover, and not really take more than like your lunch hour to do it. It probably wouldn't even take an hour. I did 3 sittings of this over a couple days because eventually it started to get like, there's no thread holding this together. This isn't a novel. It's not a short story. It's not a novella. It's not really even kind of a work of nonfiction. It's not going to tell us what we owe the future, but maybe it does. I don't know. It's just little pithy sayings, things that Balzac apparently believed were true or wanted to believe were true. And again, this is a guy who died in 1850. So these are aphorisms and truisms, epigrams, coming from a distant past, right? A distant past. So it's funny, it's clever, it's shockingly misogynistic. He basically has nothing good whatsoever to say about women. He has nothing whatsoever good to say about marriage. There's this just general snidey contempt for the British. So all that's in there. And yet, right, I pulled out a couple of quotes. And you can, if you want to go to Goodreads and find my Goodreads review, and then also join our Goodreads group, the Fantasy Authors Handbook Goodreads group, then you'll see some of those that I pulled out that I thought were kind of interesting, but as a historical curiosity, as just a fun thing, not really to be taken seriously because of the really, really many years between all of these things being written, and then even many years since they were collected in 1959 till now. You just read it with that. It ends with the last one is, among even the happiest married couples, there are always moments of regret. That's like the nicest thing. He has said, here's one that I probably can't read on YouTube about marriage, so we're not going to do that. A lot of it is about remorse and regret and stuff like that. Maybe he wrote some of these when he was like my age. I'm just saying. I mean, here's one. Does this make any sense to anyone in 2024? Today, nobility is gone. There is only a peerage. Oh, no. There's only a peerage. The hell are you talking about, man? I mean, right. A girl fresh from a boarding school may perhaps be a virgin, but no, she is never chaste. What the heck, right? I don't know. It was, I'm not necessarily like lots better for having read it, but I'm not worse. I'm not like, yes, we should definitely worry about the peerage and, oh, those Brits, we hate them. Come on, right? You can read this, get a chuckle, find a couple of interesting quotes that, you might see this, right, on Fantasy Authors Handbook, other places from me, quoting Balzac, it'll be from here. Because he wasn't like a dumb guy, obviously. He had some interesting things to say, no? But I think when he was trying to be funny, and I'm sure got a big hoot back in the olden days, this one, it just feels, it ranges from silly to just kind of mean-spirited. Epigrams on Men, Women, and Love by Balzac. Those were the books that I've read that I finished reading in February of 2024. So what do we have left? Let's look at the books that I am currently reading. Now, of course, this is a changing beast, right? So some of the books that I just showed you that I read were not on the January video of what I'm currently reading. If you actually care, and you don't have to care, I don't expect you to care. You can follow me on Goodreads to know what I'm reading and what. Anyway, like we talked about last time, books that I'm currently reading, I'm reading 5 at any given time, not obviously simultaneously, you know how this works. And starting with what I call primary fiction. So I'm always reading one work of fiction that I just pick out from what I have here at home, which is many, many, many books. And that I just choose to read because I want to. And what I'm currently reading in that category, and have gotten kind of a slow start on it. I'm not really very far in, but loving it so far. I mean, the writing is really, really, really good. Very surprising. Lots of strangeness going on. Didn't have any idea what to expect from this. This was just another kind of bought this on whatever recommendation and didn't know anything about it. Tried not to, right? I don't read the back cover. I don't want to know. I want to go in as cold as possible. And so far, not at all regretting it. This is Painkillers by Simon Ings. Love the cover. You got to really zoom in there to see who it's by and what it's called. But there's a lot of really interesting design going on here, and I love a well-designed book cover. No. Spine is nice. Carries the art in negative in the back. Just very beautifully presented. This is a UK edition again. Their B format, sort of trade paperback. I don't know. So far, loving it. Will it tell me what we owe the future by the end? I don't know. Probably not. But so far, so good, right? Painkillers by Simon Ings. I guess I'm pronouncing that right. Simon I-N-G-S Ings. Ings, maybe? Next, there's always a nonfiction book going. You saw a couple of them here. Well, you saw 3 of them here, actually. I kind of blew through nonfiction last month, didn't I? Right now, this is The Weird and the Eerie I'm reading now, currently just started, by Mark Fisher. This was recommended and discussed a little bit by Eugene Thacker. I read his 3 books on the horror of philosophy, which I absolutely recommend. You can find that. I'll try to remember to link to it in the Books for Fantasy Authors series. You got to read those. Basically, this just gets into the distinction between the weird and the eerie, and sort of the philosophy, not necessarily behind horror per se, but definitely the philosophy behind Gothic fiction, sort of, yeah. And what do we mean when we say the weird? What do we mean when we say the eerie? And how are those different? So, philosophy, literary, not really criticism, but literary sciences, whatever, by Mark Fisher. I don't know. So far it's good. Every once in a while you have to read something like this to keep this thing chugging along, right? That it isn't all just kind of fantasy, story, sci-fi, old, funny old sci-fi thing. Tom Swift, yay. Perry Rodan, silly. You got to also get smart, You owe that to the future. You owe that to your future self. Next up is the random book, and I've shown you the random piles. I keep promising I'll do a video all about how the random book stacks work and all that stuff. But chosen literally by random die roll is this. This should probably actually really have gone on the books I read, because I have this much to go. 2 chapters, which I will finish reading while this video is uploading. So imagine that this exists. This is, in a state of quantum flux between books being read and books having been read in February, because it is still February. It's the 29th. Happy Leap Day, everybody. Anyway, Starbridge by Jack Williamson, James Egan. This is out there. You can find, I think there's a newer kind of reprint of it. This is a reprint as well. This book was originally written in 1955. This is a 1982 Del Rey edition with cover art. It has cover art. See the cover art? Don't judge a book by its cover this time. It sort of begins like a pulp western, sort of, but then subconscious, or not, very consciously also science fiction, and then becomes science fiction completely. And definitely has a lot of, or it sort of has one foot in the pulp sci-fi era and pulp westerns and just sort of pulp fiction era, which I adore. And then another foot predicting a sort of new wave science fiction. So it gets more political, it gets more substantive, and it's really, really good. And I think it's the kind of a lost. Can we use the word masterpiece? I don't know. I think like Gentleman Overboard, right? It's a very worthy book that seems to have kind of fallen out and not really been. It's not. I don't see it really being talked about a lot out there. So I hereby talk about it. Starbridge by Jack Williamson and James E. Gunn. Really, really good. It says it's a rousing space adventure. It is, and it's more than that. Yes, Starbridge. Purchased, I don't know when. It might have been in one of those big boxes. This is how many books I buy and how long I've been doing this. I don't even remember. It could have been like 6 months ago I got this, or 10 years ago. Picked at random out of the giant stacks of books, and no regrets. Already wrote a blog post about it, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. Starbridge by Jack Williamson and James E. Gunn, full-throated recommendation. Speaking of loving so far, still working on the long read. So this is actually 2 books, right? The first 2 of the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. And then when I'm done with this, I'll go immediately into the second volume, the last 2 books. And then there's a 5th book that stands alone. So this is my long read in their tradition of The Essential Ellison, which was amazing, and War and Peace, which was not. We're doing one long book at a time, taking our time with it. I'm not very far into it, but already adore it. And this one just talked to me immediately. I'm going to redouble my efforts to really read this as we get into March, and just work this into my schedule, because I don't want to lose track of it. It's so far really good. Everybody talks about this. There is some dissent. Not everybody. Nothing is unanimous, right? How many bad reviews have you read of your favorite book? The sort of cornerstone books of any genre, Lord of the Rings gets bad reviews, Dune gets terrible reviews, etc. So I've seen some bad ones about this one, but very, very few. Mostly this is an absolute must-read. Why haven't I read it by now? Who knows, man? There's a lot of books. I'm pedaling as fast as I can. And this is Shadow and Claw by Gene Wolfe. Okay, so you saw that I read the Paris Review, and I switched between these different series like Perry Rodan behind me and Tom Swift that we already talked about. After the literary magazine comes up the Ace Double. Very excited. You know I love my Ace Doubles, and you know what an Ace Double is. It's one book on this side and another book on that side. This is another one where I just kind of crept into it, and I really need to read more, but I was kind of like, I want to finish Starbridge. I really want to finish Madman's Library. And I was just busy during the month of February. So this is 2 books. The Spaceborne by E.C. Tubb. Again, I did a short mentioning this is the first mention of the generation ship in science fiction. This was originally published in magazine form, and it was called Starship back in when? I think it was 1955, 56, 55, whatever. So this is the first book publication of it, though. Starborne by E.C. Tubb. And it's the first time someone thought of, well, it's going to take, I think he said it's going to take like 300 years, or they've been out for 300 years, something like that. And so there are generations of people live on the ship on their way to even the nearest star. That often relied upon sci-fi concept starts here. On the other side, a classic Philip K. Dick, right? Sort of pre-New Wave, mid-50s, right? Late 50s, Philip K. Dick, The Man Who Japed. Ace doubles can generally be had with, for not a lot of money. There are people like me who collect them and go crazy for them, but not a lot of people. You know what I mean? A lot of people, but not millions and millions of people. So you can kind of get some for like $4, $5, $3, whatever, here and there. The later ones for even less. But I think I paid $35 for this one. The PKD books are going to be expensive. The Dean Koontz books are going to cost you a little bit of money. The Ursula K. Le Guin Hainish books that started here. Ace Doubles. Look at that cover art. Outstanding. And if you don't like that, there's these dudes. On the first ever Generation Starship. All right, so those are the 5 books that I'm reading. And now let's get to the one that I want to talk about, because you do have to go to Goodreads and just go ahead and join the Fantasy Authors Handbook Goodreads group, which is open to anybody. Links below. And we do every other month, this will be our second one because this is all a very new thing, a group read. And last month, and again, we talked about that, right? We read Take Joy by Jane Yolen, really my favorite writing book of all time. And then in February, I had the poll up there. I think we had 3, I'm right at my computer and I can look it up or whatever. I think we had 3 nominees. And this is the one that is an odds-on favorite. I'm talking to you at 1:41 in the afternoon Pacific time on the 29th. So the poll still goes until midnight, really, or 1 minute to midnight. So there could be some sort of last-minute bursts of votes, but I don't think so. So in this one, has a like 3 or whatever vote margin, and not many people have voted. Growing Great Characters from the Ground Up. A thorough primer for writers of fiction and nonfiction by Martha Engberg. I just make up names for people. Martha Engberg. This was nominated by one of the members of the group. I've never heard of it. I jumped on to Amazon, though, once it seemed like clearly it was like the front runner early. And I thought, well, even if it doesn't win, right, I'm always up for a recommendation for a book on the art and craft of writing fiction, right? We keep reading those. Remember we talked about what to do with all this writing advice? Get the writing advice. Try it if it seems like it's reasonably reasonable, and see what happens. So here's what we're going to do. As a group on Fantasy Authors Handbook group on Goodreads, we are going to read Growing Great Characters from the Ground Up over the month of March and see what we think. What can we use from here? I don't know. I've never heard of this book. I went and bought it from Amazon. I had to get a used one because it appears to be out of print, which was shockingly true for the Jane Yolen book too, but I don't know. I guess they don't always hang in there. My copy has a couple of highlights where somebody went and highlighted it, which is terrific. I could just feel like, right? Who did this belong to? Colleen Hoover? Maybe. You don't know. She didn't put her name in it. It doesn't say Christmas 1963 because it's much newer than that. March 2024, Fantasy Authors Handbook Group Read. Fantasy Authors Handbook Group Read for March 24. I'm not going to do editing. I'm just going to say the words, and they will make sense to someone someday. Come and read this with us. All right, last thing, this is already longer than I want it to be. So let's run through what you saw, what you read, because you definitely every Tuesday you read Fantasy Authors Handbook. Right? So here's what I covered over on the blog in February, starting February 6th with Active Search Because. Because sometimes comes across as clunky to me, and I don't know why. So in an effort to try to answer that question just for myself, I wrote about it on February 6th. If any editor has ever cut the word because from a manuscript, you'll want to read this article, right? If you are thinking, How many rules do I have to follow now? And all of a sudden I can't use the word because. That's not what I'm saying. But I get into because. And next, on February 13th, it's always every Tuesday. It's always every Tuesday since 2009. Because that's what I do. You're welcome. What we can learn from a random science fiction novel. In this case, Show versus Info Dump, in which I took a big sample out of, yes, you guessed it, Starbridge by Jack Williamson and James E. Gunn. What do we mean by show, don't tell, right? We've gotten into a lot of that here already. It's all over my blog. It's one of the things that we do need to pay attention to as authors, but also calm down about as authors. So in this case, what I wanted to show was, as I was reading this, and this is what I do, right? I read all these books, and they trigger things in my head, like, oh, right there. And in this case, it was, here is an example of how a genre author, right? Because show, don't tell is harder, I think, or it can be anyway, for fantasy and science fiction authors. Because you are creating this world, you can't just sort of rely on it being, okay, it's in Chicago or whatever, and everybody knows what that is. So I found an example here that I thought really, really worked, where the character is experiencing this weird thing, and it allows him, right, him, the character, the point of view character, to think about the world building around him as he's trying to figure out how to get out of this really, really difficult situation. And he's looking for things that are, well, that could be an option. Well, no, but this is because it works like this. And while he's trying to figure out how to get out of there, we're learning about the world in the moment when it matters, right? So there's a lot of kind of telling stuff in there because the character knows what these things are, and it's kind of, but he's thinking about it. No, I don't think that's probably not going to work. So there's a context for that information that's more interesting. So if you're struggling at all with show, don't tell, if people have been telling you, oh, take this post, right, what we can learn from a random science fiction novel, and this is a thing I've been doing for a long time now, and you'll find links to the other ones. When I pick one of these books at random, not always at all, but every once in a while it's like, yes, right, let's talk about that just appears from these old books. Then on the 20th, don't be hating on prologues again. February 27th. On February 27th, I basically just pimped this YouTube channel. So if you're even watching this, it's too late, right? You can go back to that if you want to and just basically see me saying, like, I have 910 subscribers on the blog, which is not enough. You should subscribe to that as well. And only 224. There's more than 224 since then. So this thing worked, by the way, right? Yes, authors, you do have to market yourself. You don't have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to be weird about it. You don't have to spend $50,000 to do it, whatever. This is on my blog you'll see ads on there. I have nothing to do with those ads. I don't pay for this website, and I don't get paid for the website, but it works, right? Being out there just as somebody like me talking about, hey, I love these genres, I'm trying to help, right? Then brings that attention in so that I can, be able to do this for a living for all these years. So don't be afraid to market yourself, but in an interesting way and in a useful way, so that it isn't just, but here's the link to my book, you ought to buy the book. The book is then you need to buy the link, and then you're going to hashtag book, hashtag me, right? Hey, let's have a conversation about genre fiction, about books, about publishing, about what we owe the future. And hey, if that gives you maybe a dozen or so more subscribers to your YouTube channel, fantastic. You know. So that anyway, that was what we saw on Fantasy Authors Handbook, the blog, in February of 2024, and that pretty much does it for this month. Tomorrow it is March, and a new set of priorities will click into place. You know that I'm reading all those. I probably won't finish the Gene Wolfe book in that period of time, but come and see me again in a month, and you will see all new books that I have. You'll see these books as having been read. You'll see books that I have bought. I know there is actually at least 2 that are on their way to me now, and I will have written a full month worth of every Tuesday weekly blogs at Fantasy Authors Handbook. Links below. You know what to do. Thank you so very much for watching. Maybe a month from now, I'll get this to be shorter. Thank you, everybody. Seriously, everybody, stop the presses. Are you kidding? I was just about to upload this video and the mailman dropped off. This book, remember I said there were 2 more on its way? Well, there's only 1 more on its way. Tom Swift and his Spectromarine Selector. Love these titles. Love the gadgets. Has arrived. Only 2 more Tom Swift Jr. books to complete the series. Last second delivery for February. Fantastic.